This is Matt Ritchey, and you're listening to the Matt Balaker podcast.
Hi, good people out there. Thank you once again for tuning into the Matt Balaker podcast. To earn extra credit, please encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. And if you want to graduate summa cum laude, please write a 5-star review. That not only helps my ego, but it feeds the algorithm. I love you guys. And as a gesture of that, I bring on the best guests I can find. And today's guest is fantastic. He's not only a father, he's the author of Elevated Executive. He's the founder of Inner Circle, a dedicated plant medicine community of leaders and innovators. Please welcome Matt Ritchey to the program. How you doing, Matt?
Thanks for having me, Matt. I'm doing excellent. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. And, Matt, for viewers out there, he has a really cool setup in his studio out there. And you're a multifaceted, multi-talented dude. I want to get into your book a little bit. I wrote one plug, Greg Giraldo comedian story, but I want to learn from you, like what motivated you to actually write this book?
Yeah, so I've been writing that book for about a decade, right? This is my first book. So I think everyone that I talk to, you're writing your first book much longer than maybe if you do a second one or a third one. But I take copious notes ever since I started meditating and, just getting stuff out of my head and onto paper and, somewhere I can review it or even just never look at it again. But either way, I've been taking lots of notes and essentially writing this book for the last almost 15 years now. It's already, like I say, it's almost 2024. Basically 2010, I started to really dive deep into that. And, the book, it's been something, like I say, it's been obviously an insight into my journey and everything I've done, but it's also, once you can look back and connect the dots, you can really put, a sequence of events together and really, storytell in a way that not only keeps the reader engaged, but really tells learn the lessons of whatever I've accomplished and the things that I've done over the last decade. So the book was really something that, I always wanted to do, and just now here in 2023, finally getting it on the rails, and it'll be finished here in the next couple of months. So 2024, I'll be getting it out into the public and really getting it to out of my head and into the public, so to speak.
Well, be sure to buy at least 7,000 to 24,000 copies, listeners out there. And now that you're kind of in the home stretch of getting this book out there to the public, I guess what are some takeaways, or what do you know now that you wish you knew when you started this writing process?
Well, yeah, the writing process of a book is no joke, and as far as it's a dedicated, it's a full-time, I don't say full-time job, but it's a full-time commitment to writing, to reviewing, to storytelling. There's one thing to have ideas or even good things, but then you got to tell it in a story format. No one really wants to read bullet points or boring anecdotes that don't really hit home. So for me, it's really been a process of refining, because I had all the things I really wanted to say and all the things that I really wanted people to know or learn. And then it's like, okay, well, how do I do that in a way that's engaging? How do I do that in a way that's telling my stories in a way? And to be completely honest, I'm not doing it all myself. I have a ghostwriter that's helping me write some of this, because I'm not a writer. That's not my forte. As much as I do write, I don't consider myself a writer. So in order to really have it hit home and really have people be inspired by it, I really wanted to have someone who was a professional writer to really get me over the finish line and really keep me inspired to continue to do the work this year. Because once you pay the money and get someone on board, then it's for me it's just about that inspiration and chipping a chair, as far as having someone there to push you and really kind of help you throughout the process. Because I find that when I'm not clear or when I'm outside of my zone of genius, then I procrastinate, or I do things do things very slowly. So in order to really light that fire, I need to hire someone and pay some money out of pocket.
Well, there's a major benefit. I mean, and this is probably consistent with your career path to putting good people around you. I remember in the kind of final stages of the book, I was writing with Wayne Jones. We had a fair amount of people helping, but we paid out of pocket for this editor who wasn't cheap, but was amazing. And we had been working on it for a couple of years, and she told us, this looks like a good outline for a book, but not a story. And we were just like, oh crap. But it was the best advice we had, because it speaks to what you're saying. It was a situation where we had to edit. I think I cut 10,000 words like a couple weeks before it went to publish. And and really create into a story. So I think that's really important advice for people out there, not just for books, but for PowerPoint presentations. If you're speaking in front of people, just stories sell. Data points can get people bored. But you mentioned meditation, Matt, and I think it's become so popular. I mean, it's probably been popular for millennia, but in California, it seems trendy almost. What kind of motivated you to take meditation seriously and make it a part of your regular routine?
Yeah, the first time I tried to meditate was I say tried because I literally couldn't do it when I first sat down. This is 2000, end of 2009, beginning of 2010. I had a friend who was a meditator, and like, let's just try 5 minutes, right? And literally sitting down for a minute, I was just like fidgety, and I'm just very, I like to be in action, right? So for me, I couldn't do it at first. So the first time I tried to do it, I couldn't even really meditate, and I shelved it for like 2 years. And January, and at that point, I've been doing 30-day challenges to kind of figure out, do different things, whether it be writing or in this case, meditation. So in January of 2012, I did a 30-day meditation challenge with some friends and some people that I was working with at the time. And I just never stopped. I did 30 straight days, and I thought it was so impactful and had such an impact in my life day to day that I just didn't stop. So basically, it's been about coming up on 12 years now that I've been meditating daily. Now, of course, I've missed a few days here and there, but for the first few years, I didn't miss any days because it was that impactful and it really moved the needle that much as far as my presence, my ability to think more coherently and or just find more creative ideas and or to, like, say, get these ideas out of my head. So when I started meditating, that's when I started journaling more. That's when I started really getting my thoughts out of my head and onto paper, because that really helps my process of feeling more complete with a meditation or feeling more complete with the thoughts that are in my head. So for me, it was just a challenge. Like I say, I just like to take up different challenges, try new things. And for me, meditation seems so out there. I'm like, well, if I can do it for 30 days, I can try this for 30 days, maybe it'll have an impact. And obviously it had such an impact that I just never stopped.
Wow. I read one book that spoke on meditation, and the first exercise was I think eating a peanut, or it said take a snack and like think about every bite and focus on that, because I think the purpose was to get you out of your head in a way where like you have to be still and quiet and kind of like the traditional hands in prayer position. What postures, or I guess what is your meditative process? Are you more static, or do you walk, or what do you do?
Yeah, great question. So early on, I only sat. Like I said, I just sat and had sat on a pillow, did my cross-legged and whatever, because that's what I was kind of taught. And then I started learning different types of meditation. And there's walking meditation. There's and meditation is an interesting concept, because I feel like people meditate, they don't even know it, right? So when people, they say maybe your flow state is painting or it's running, or for me, I like bicycling, right? So anything you can do that gets you super, super present, clears your thoughts, gets you into the present moment, and really connects you to who you are and what you want to be. That for me is a meditation to a certain degree. So I do different types of meditation now, but I still do sit every morning for minimum 5 minutes. Like I say, when I first started meditating, I had no kids and whatever. So I do 20, 30, 60-minute meditations, and it was awesome. Yeah. I haven't done a 60-minute meditation for a couple of years now. I have a 2 and a 5-year-old. But I do at least 5 minutes every morning. Like this morning, I got my 5-year-old to join me for at least 3 of those minutes. Got her to sit down, and I've been practicing to try and get her to have some stillness and some calmness, just to kind of sit there. Super challenging for really young kids, if you have anyone out there. But for me, I do really like even just minimum, I love 10 minutes, but 5 to 10 minutes of just presence, just kind of getting my thoughts clear. And then for me, after my meditation, I do visualization practice. And this is actually something I've done for even before I meditated. I grew up racing motocross, and my coach at the time, after my trainings, I would sit in a sauna, and he would have me close my eyes and just visualize the track, because I knew all the tracks I would ride on. I knew every corner, I knew everything. So I would literally just visualize and do laps in my head of what, where to get on the gas here, where to get on the brakes there, visualize myself passing people. So for me and, everyone, visualization is super powerful, because our brain, our subconscious brain, doesn't really know the difference of a really well visualized goal or a really visualized act or actually doing that. So the science is pretty interesting, where when you visualize something, and you feel it, so you can feel the wind, you can feel whatever sensations, really tap in with all your 5 senses, or more senses, depending on what you think. But whenever you really tune into your senses, it really helps you to embody and believe whatever it is you're doing. So it helps you whenever you actually get into that state, whether it be speaking on stage or running a race or whatever it is, you feel more confident, you feel more comfortable doing it because your mind's already been there. So for me, it's meditation with the visualization effort. So for me, I visualize my day, I visualize, my perfect, if I'm having a podcast that day or whatever, I kind of visualize myself sitting down. I don't, visualize the whole 30 or 60 minutes, but I can visualize myself getting set up, and it's like basically setting my brain up, basically preceding my brain to do any of the activities I really want to do.
That's well, there's a lot of good stuff there, but one thing I noticed is for someone in motocross, it looks like you have use of all your limbs. That's very impressive. What got you into that sport, Matt?
Yeah, I was 13 when I grew up riding like four-wheelers. I grew up in the mountains of Pennsylvania, right? And so I grew up riding four-wheelers. We had some land and whatever. And I had friends that rode dirt bikes, and my mom was adamant that I didn't get a dirt bike because,
yeah,
I can
she
look
loves
at you now. I can understand, like, two wheels is definitely more dangerous than four. And she saw the application for racing it too, which is like a whole nother level of danger, right? So at 13 years old, my dad snuck and bought me my first little YZ85, and she was furious, and she wouldn't let me ride it without my dad. And for the first year, basically, I was just kind of figuring out how to ride. And then after that, I loved it so much, I started racing and I got good at it. So then my mom actually came, and she was my biggest fan / coach we traveled all up and down the East Coast, and I was pretty good. I actually got pretty good at racing. So did a lot of travel with that, but it was something that, I always loved speed. I grew up racing, snowboarding and stuff like that. So for me, it was just like the speed and the presence and the flow state that motocross gave you was unlike anything that I experienced before. So it was really cool to kind of get into that. And then, like you said, I met lots of people who got injured, lots of people who got paralyzed. I had a few friends that died.
Oh, wow.
I definitely saw the whole gamut of what could happen. And after 7 years, right before my 20th birthday, I had a pretty bad crash, and I basically landed on my tailbone from about 20 feet up, and I compressed vertebrae in my back, and I had to take 6 months with like real no compression, no running, no anything. And during that time, I really got clear that I'd started kind of late to the game. I didn't start racing until I was 13. And a lot of the guys I was racing.
You're an old man. Yeah, go ahead.
They started racing at 4. A lot of those guys started racing at 4 and 5 years old. So I was a little bit behind the ball as far as like not having the skills and the muscle memory to race at that level. So I really realized that motocross was not my calling, and that and honestly, the thing that really kicked it off though, because I still wanted to, like, I can figure it out, I can beat these guys. But then I really figured out I want to walk when I'm 30. That was my goal. I was almost 20. I was like, I want to be able to walk when I'm 30. And
wow. So wait, time out. Did you think you might not be able to walk after this accident, or what was
no?
This
injury wasn't that bad, but I foresaw, I saw other friends who couldn't walk, and I foresaw myself, if I continued to keep going, there was a pretty high percentage of possibility that I would maybe not be paralyzed, but I could have, detrimental to my limb. Like, say you could have a bad knee injury, you could have something like that, where you just wouldn't be able to have my faculties like I really wanted to do. And I'm a very active person. So it was that was the actual, like, the stop sign of like, oh, maybe this is not what you want to do, because this is something that, it's pretty dangerous. And there's definitely a lot of risk. And I'm always risk reward, and the reward had really gone down compared to the risk. So for me, right around 20 years old, I just kind of stepped out of it, and then I still ride. I'm going to go back to Pennsylvania this fall here and do a little riding, but it's just something I do for fun and pleasure now, where I can just kind of, do it very lightly, as opposed to, like, when you're racing and doing something, it's pretty hardcore.
Very hardcore. I think an example of how hardcore it is, you just mentioned, like, you were potentially immobile for 6 months, and you're like, it wasn't that bad of an injury. I just thought, in the future I'd have like real serious ones, not this little like nick. So you got into racing, then you kind of had the wherewithal to make choices that were a little bit less dangerous. And I saw in your bio, Matt, that something that stuck out is you studied the brain and something about the blueprint to consciousness. I find it very interesting, but I know very little about it. Can you share what you were studying?
Well, that's a very, very large topic, very loaded topic. So I did have 5 concussions when I was racing as well. So early on, I got pretty interested in just brain activity and just, what I could do to protect my brain, whether you be taking supplements and stuff like that. So things like CBD is a neuroprotectant, right? I don't know if anyone out there watching knows anything about CBD or the cannabis plant in general, but it's actually a neuroprotectant. That's why that's why a lot of the football players were using it and or still use it, because it really does actually help with your brain function. It helps with, like, keeping your brain firing and wiring as it should, so to speak. So there's a lot we could go into on that. But for me, I started just studying, what it was about protecting the brain. And then really I got deep into just, like say, meditation kind of took it into a spiritual place. But even before I started meditating, I was interested in, what drives us? Like, what's our subconscious? What's the things that are, how's our brain work, right? Because we have this supercomputer in our head that we don't really get taught about as young people. And no one really, and for maybe just lack of knowledge or lack of really application at this point, most people don't teach or know much about it. So for me, I was just I'm ultra curious of anything that can really help me be better, do something better. So I just started studying, all the great, say the greats, but the people who talk about brain, brain function, brain, like say, between protecting it and then doing things to uncover it and to really dive deep into your subconscious mind and figure out what your drivers are. Like say, I had a mentor tell me this metaphor. It's like most people are just, their unconscious brain is the boat and you're the water skier, just kind of falling around. So whatever the unconscious, whatever unconscious beliefs you have, whatever unconscious thoughts you have, they're essentially driving your ship, right? They're driving your boat. And if you're not aware of them, they'll drive you in places that maybe you don't want to go. Or if you don't get a control of the boat, so to speak, you can waste your life doing things that you maybe didn't really want to do, and you don't know it until it's too late, right? You can always connect the dots going backwards, but in the time, you don't always know that. So for me, I studied neuro-linguistic programming. I don't know if anyone's familiar with that. Some people say it's a pseudoscience, but it's basically the study of language and the brain and how we can use language to, I like this word, but people don't like this, manipulate our brains, right? How can we use a language, thought processes, and different breath and other modalities to plant in belief systems, to plant in seed whatever it is we truly want to think and feel and be and do. So when I got really deep into that, I started, like that's when I started to really get the visualization to a really on point thing where I could visualize myself and whatever I wanted to do, plant the seeds of whatever reality I wanted to manifest, and really start to, it's practice. It's like anything else. You do it daily, you do it weekly, you do it for years, you're going to start driving your ship in a direction that you choose to do, as opposed to being unconsciously pulled. And we can go into the stories if you want, but I had, some unconscious drivers that were driving me because, we all have those, but I was, I had some trauma as a kid that was really driving me in a way that I was unhealthy. Right. Mm-hmm. And like I say, it probably led to my more, I don't want to say erratic behavior, but like, doing motocross and things like that are high risk, high reward.
Sure.
My brain was wired in a way that I was in kind of fight or flight a lot. Right. So for me,
kind of an adrenaline junkie.
Exactly. So for me, when I figured that out and I got to uncover those, I had some repressed memories from when I was a kid. When I uncovered that and did some healing work around that, then I was able to like calm my nervous system. I was able to actually be more present with things, and I was able to actually then drive the boat in a way that I was really in a direction I was really wanting to go.
That well, I'm glad you said that, and I think there's a criticism of some of this like consciousness study where it's hippy dippy, whatever. But one of the hardest things, and you have young kids, is when they're flustered. Again, we always say calm down. I'm super guilty of this, Matt. I'll tell my kids calm down, and I've only started now to say like, all right, take a really long exhale, or take a deep inhale and then exhale twice as long, or something like that. So it's actually like you said, manipulating, in this case, breath, but it's to impact the mood, which I assume is linked to the brain, to improve your state, and it's pretty immediate. And so, I mean, I'm certainly not smart enough to say like what's science and what isn't, but I mean, I think it's pretty stupid to just dismiss something. And like, I mean, talking to you, I haven't known you super long, but you're very easy to talk to, and you don't fidget. I interview lots of people, and getting people to just be present, myself included, is a challenge. But I think when people take active steps to be aware of their thoughts, it shows up in ways that are super beneficial. Whether it's being calm, whether it's being more present for your kids, whether it's being able to take things in stride in business. I mean, I think there's so many positive repercussions when you realize, okay, I can calm my mind a little bit, or I have more control over my thoughts than I imagined.
Mm-hmm. And you mentioned breath is our easiest to access, most impactful tool that we have available at all times, right? So for me, my first psychedelic experience was actually through breath. So like holotropic breathing, if anyone out there has ever done any kind of like breath work, there's different types of breath work, of course, but holotropic breathing is a way we can literally drop into a state of consciousness that basically, like say, this is a drug factory up here. We can, drip our own chemicals from DMT to other things with the breath and without exogenous chemicals, without exogenous, substances. So for me, breath, I learned early on that breath, like say, is your gateway to the present moment. It is your easiest access tool. It is the thing that I teach my daughter now. She's 5 years old, and I'm guilty of it as well. Sometimes like, relax, calm down. It's like, okay,
chill out.
breathe, take a breath. And I find it rubbing off now because one of our friends, she was playing with one of her friends, and they got flustered or whatever, and Mila was teaching this other girl to breathe, right? So it's really cool to see that kind of rub off and really, like I say, give her tools at an early age that obviously I didn't have at that age. So the more tools that we can have that are easily available and that are super healthy, obviously your breath is extremely healthy for you.
Yeah.
I think that's the best thing we can do. So we can be present, and everything happens in the present moment. When you think about that, it's like everything I'm ever doing is happening now. So when I can be present to whatever it is I'm committed to doing, if I'm committed to a podcast or I'm committed to being one-on-one with my daughter, whatever it is, the breath is our access there. And there's literally hundreds and if not thousands of different types of breath work that you can do for different effects, right? You can do, alternate nostril breathing to kind of connect the hemispheres of your brain. You can do box breathing to kind of just calm your nervous system down. Or you can do holotropic breathing where it really literally ignites your system and really brings you into like a psychedelic state. So our breath is extremely powerful, and that's where I teach everyone to kind of start. Meditation is great, but breath is the key into meditative state.
Well, connect with your breath, folks, and you're passionate about plant medicine. What got you into that?
Well, as I was saying before, I had some repressed memories as a kid, and 15 years, I didn't, unconsciously they were driving me, but I didn't think about them consciously. So when I was 27 years old, I tried cannabis for the first time. And for me, it was an igniter. So I raced motocross and I didn't drink alcohol or anything until I was 21. So from 21 to 27, I had a good
straight out drug. Now I can legally consume beer. Like, bring it on. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, there was part of it being legal, and I grew up in the DARE era, right? I grew up in the DARE program.
Same here, yeah.
Pennsylvania, and I equated cannabis with heroin or anything else. It was just
a Schedule I narcotic. There's no medical benefits, Matt.
Right. Yeah, that's what they say. So anyway, I was very skeptical even when I moved to, it'll be 17 years this month now that I moved to San Diego. And, the first 5 years here, I saw a bunch of people use cannabis, and I was kind of like, it's kind of weird, but I was here drinking my alcohol, right?
Sure.
And so for 6 years, I drank a lot of alcohol, more than I really probably obviously should have or wanted to. But at age 27, I found cannabis, and I was like, oh, alcohol was tuning me out and giving me like this, feel good, like tuned out of my feelings in my whole space. But cannabis actually tuned me in, and it opened up new thought patterns, and it literally opened up the doorway to repressed memories and things that I had never consciously thought about. Wow. So for me, cannabis was a gateway in a good way to my subconscious, a gateway to, knowing myself better. So for me, it was like, oh, okay, this is something that is actually beneficial. So I was super skeptical at first, as far as like, oh, this is like, say I had all this programming of like cannabis being bad and it's going to maybe lead to like hard drugs or whatever the programming that I had from my DARE era. So for me, I started slow, which was, like I say, everything's happening to my maximum advantage. I didn't start till I was 27. They say brain fully developed by 25, whatever you want to say. That's, that science is debatable at this point. But either way, after 25 and starting slow with, not super high doses, it really helped kind of unlock, what I was really looking for. And so from there, once you unlock it, though, then you get to deal with it and you get to heal it or not. So for me, then that was a gateway to psilocybin. That was a gateway to an ayahuasca ceremony. That was a gateway to, doing the work to heal all of those things that were inside me that were, unconsciously driving me that I didn't even know about. So for me, plant medicines was a gateway into a higher state of consciousness and essentially a higher state of being for me to show up daily, to be more present, to, be in a space where I feel, like say, when you do the work and you do, you heal whatever it is that's traumatizing you, and we all have traumas, whether it be little or big or in between. When you do that work, that gives you that space to have your nervous system relax, to be more present. So for me, I equate or I credit psychedelics and cannabis to really, changing my life and saving my life in a certain way, as far as really putting me in a different direction and giving me tools then to be a better version of myself and to really elevate my game and be what I call, like, say, an elevated executive now in business, and be an elevated father now with kids. So cannabis, psychedelics for me has been, it's been a godsend.
Yeah, it's a gateway to a better life for you, and I think that's remarkable. Um, and it's not just something that helps you in your home life. It's impacted your career. Can you share with us, how it's changed your career path?
Yeah. So obviously I was doing, this is 2010, 2011, 2012 when I first kind of got introduced to a lot of these compounds. And first off, I was never into that culture, never really into that scene per se. But then as I started to, work with that more and more, I saw the impacts it had on other people as well, both positive and negative, but mostly positive. And I worked with, like I was doing coaching and some other leadership development training with people. And a lot of these people were successful and they were using cannabis, they were using psychedelics. So it really kind of just starts to cement and kind of start to put together, like say the chapters of my book now of, what these compounds can do and what it means to be an elevated person and an elevated, being, if you will. So for me, that was sort of the early seedlings of what I could do. And then, I had a startup project that I was working on for about 4 years, from 2014 through the end of 2018. And my daughter was born end of 2018, and I was exiting that project. I was taking, a couple months off. I was like, oh, I'll take till the end of the year off, and then I'll figure out what my next, what I'm going to jump into in January. And being a daily meditator, I kept getting the downloads that all the work that I'd done around leadership training and executive coaching and kind of building teams and really figuring out what makes high performing teams work, they needed that in this space of CBD, of cannabis, of the emerging psychedelic space, that it was very Wild West, that it was very, very early on in the space, as far as just a lot of sharks in the water, a lot of people doing crazy stuff, and a lot of people, green rushing to the next big thing. And I had friends that were in the space that were complaining of, just bad actors, and like say we were getting kind of jaded with the whole industry. So I just kept getting these downloads in my meditations of like, hey, this is what your next project needs to be. This is what you really need to, this is what you've been training for. So what I got the message for is like, everything you've done has led you up to this point where you can create this leadership academy essentially in this space for people to mentor with, and to have an example. If you don't have an example, then people don't have, there's no guiding light, there's no North Star of what you could or do. So that's what we started doing. We started hosting some in-person events. Obviously, then COVID happened, so then we had to kind of halt that. We waited almost 2 years in between events, from January 2020 till I think February 2022 was our next event. But essentially, I started Inner Circle, and side note of that, like I said, I got some business partners, and we launched the very first CBD nootropic. If you're not familiar with nootropics, they're basically brain vitamins. They're specific herbs and minerals that impact the brain and have a positive impact on the brain. So we basically started and created our own stack of nootropics with CBD, which was the first. There was no CBD nootropics on the market. And in doing that, we had to vet our own partners of people to work with, and I had to be very careful. Like say we got screwed over on our very first white label CBD partner, and got a first taste of what the industry is really like. So we really started to cultivate this inner circle of people that we wanted to work with, that we wanted to collaborate with, that we wanted to strategize with. And my background is around, or in my background, I've done a lot of masterminding, right? So if you're not familiar with the mastermind concept, it's essentially, high level people getting together, sharing ideas, ideating their next level of success in business, and really sharing resources to how they, each other can get there. And it's kind of a rising tide lifting all ships together. So we started to do these masterminds of like-minded people, and it's just kind of grown from there. A lot of people love the idea of, having a vetted community of people that they can trust, having a place where they can go and bounce ideas off of. This space, like many spaces, is filled with a lot of what we call solopreneurs, right? People who are kind of doing it themselves. They may have a virtual team that helps them with this or that, but they're kind of the main person out there every day, grinding, doing whatever it is they need to do to succeed. And it can wear on you. If anyone out there is a solopreneur, it's something it's challenging day to day. You need inspiration. You maybe need feedback or whatever. So we're basically building this community of people who can lean on each other for feedback, just lean on each other for inspiration when needed, and really share tools and or resources to help everyone level up together.
I'm really glad you did that. I mean, there's so much benefit in being able to kind of have sounding boards and chat with people and connect with people that can help you, that aren't necessarily your subordinates. You're not paying them for their advice. It's more unfiltered. And also, we could have a whole separate podcast, Matt, about kind of the early years of CBD and the snake oil salesmen or saleswomen too that were involved in that, and then kind of tainting the whole industry. I mean, it's
Right.
so what you're doing is so important. Now I'm curious. You're still young, but you've done a lot of cool things in your career, and it seems like you're always evolving and growing. What are you most proud of that you've done career-wise, Matt?
Wow, that's a deep question. Well, career-wise, that's a hard question. I think obviously being a father, you're a father, I think having, I didn't always know that I wanted kids, meeting an amazing woman and like say doing more of my healing work actually helped me to want to have kids. So for me, that feels like one of my biggest successes so far in life. But aside from that, like I say, I think, a lot of people would say, oh, my kids are my most, my shining moments. That's to be expected. But outside of that, the work we really did with some of the companies like Airbnb and Facebook, for me, it showed me that I didn't want to work with those types of companies. The bureaucracy and the slow adaptation of things, was really apparent to me that I really like working with small to medium-sized businesses. So for me, like the work I've done over the last 15 years has been sort of an evolution of I've done one-on-one coaching, I've done executive coaching and training within these larger corporations, and now I'm doing more of a like say a community coaching, if you will, or community vibe, where we're bringing the best of the people together. These are all people who are successful in whatever it is they do, and to really learn. Like say, I'm a lifelong learner, so for me. Now, creating a community of people that I can learn from daily, weekly, and I can always be up-leveling my game, whether it be marketing and, whatever, to AI and tech and whatever the next things around the corner are. I feel so blessed to have cultivated a community of learners, of curiosity, of people that are continuing to grow and push the envelope in ways that are, healthy, in the sense of like, no one out there is, creating the next Silk Road or something like that, which, no shade to Ross Ulbricht. Hopefully he gets out of jail. But
I hope so.
In general, I feel like I've been really blessed to attract. I don't think it's not an accident. It's really to attract the right people that are heart centered, that are business focused, that are like minded in a sense, like say of paying it forward, and being able to get the ego out of the way, in the sense of like there's a lot of business people that I've met over the years that just can't get out of their own way, and they're successful to a certain degree, and how happy they are in that success is debatable. But I've been so blessed to be around people who are non-egocentric and being able to, like say, the energy of paying it forward to, like say that rising tide lifting all ships together is something that I'm just looking back now. I'm just very grateful to have the opportunity to learn daily and weekly from these people, so that I can continue to up-level my businesses, my family, my life, and everything like that. So I feel like the community that I've built is just, something that I couldn't have imagined 15 years ago. When I moved to California 15, 17 years ago, I had no community. I didn't know anyone here. So it's like I've gone from nothing to like this amazing community. And that to me is still kind of blows my mind.
Yeah, you've helped build a community of up levelers, and I think that's pretty cool. I'd be proud of that. What are you especially optimistic about?
Well, I am optimistic about our industry. Like I say, as much as the whole economy right now is a little flat, and our industry is plagued by taxation and different things, where from bureaucracy and red tape and federal legalization or non-legalization. But I'm very, very optimistic. I think actually within a shorter period of time, psychedelics, specifically MDMA, ketamine, and psilocybin, will be federally legal and will have more access for people to access. So I'm more bullish on psychedelics than I am on cannabis in the short term, as far as legality and the adaptation, because this is my personal belief, but the conversation around cannabis has been so ingrained for so long around it being just, a gateway drug or whatever the stigma is. And I don't want to say the impacts aren't, I think it has great medicinal value because I use it. I know lots of people do, but the effects are not as contrast. They're not as stark as psychedelics. Like you can't deny a soldier that comes back and has PTSD and they do one ketamine treatment or one ayahuasca ceremony, and they're essentially a different person. Right. You can't deny that. The science you can't overlook that. So what we're seeing is that adaptation of this huge shift happening, where people can't deny the reality of psychedelics. So that's going to be pushing it forward into the mainstream, into the legality much quicker than cannabis, because cannabis has, we'll just say, more subtle effects, right? More subtle medicinal effects even. So for me, I'm very bullish on psychedelics in the short term. I think long term, I don't think it'll be in this presidency, but potentially who the next president is, or even within the next 8 years, cannabis could be, taken off, hopefully descheduled. Like they're talking about rescheduling, but hopefully they just deschedule it.
Yeah.
And, because alcohol is not scheduled, tobacco is not scheduled, these aren't scheduled, whatever. And obviously cannabis, I believe, has way more medicinal value than tobacco or alcohol. So, hopefully getting that descheduled, I'm very bullish and very optimistic that, we're moving in the right direction. It's been slow and steady in the cannabis space, but it's actually been quick and going, upward in the psychedelic space. So we're seeing lots of things, like say a lot of cities and even states now are decriminalizing, MDMA, ketamine, psilocybin for studying. And there are, all these studies that are coming out, everything's pointing it up. Everything's pointing in the right direction. So that's really inspiring to me that we can really, push the needle on that. And like I say, cannabis we'll drag it along with us. And I think it'll be something that we can, get into the same space as. Like I said, that's why we use plant medicines as sort of an umbrella, because it's all these different compounds, all these different things that kind of work synergistically or work as a, I think we had a sick care system, but I think we had a healthcare system. A healthcare system would be working on preventative measures, right? And these are things that help prevent measures, whether it be Alzheimer's or any of these other things you can do to, prolong your quality of life, as opposed to, living longer and having poor quality of life.
Yeah, I like that. The goal is to not only live longer, but have a higher peak. Like they talk about this in sports, like who had the longest peak, like about LeBron James or something.
So LeBron's got the longest peak of any sport. Maybe Brady. Brady had a high peak.
Well, we want all our peaks longer and higher. Well, where can people learn more about you, what you're up to, and the next great things you're doing, Matt?
Well, if you're wanting to learn more about the psychedelic and the cannabis space, innercircle.biz is our website. You can check that out. Matt at innercircle.biz if you really want to get in contact directly with me. I'm on a couple of the social media platforms. LinkedIn's probably my most active, just because they don't censor anything over there. So we got off all the meta platforms, and we don't really do much on those anymore, just because they shadow ban and don't really, they don't not spreading the message. So we're staying off a lot of that social media and just kind of talking in smaller circles. But reaching out to me directly, you can go to matt-ritchey.com is my personal website. If you go to mattritchey.com, it's an actor in LA. He's got that domain locked in. I've talked to him a few times. But you can go to matt-ritchey.com if you want to learn more about me and what all the things I've done. And then, innercircle.biz is our community, our B2B business community you can learn more about. And, I'm always curious to talk to new people about what they're doing or how they've used psychedelics or how they've potentially used cannabis to their benefit. And, people have questions all the time. Like I just spoke at a panel last week, and, these are all pretty well off entrepreneurs and whatever. And of course, everyone hears about all the stuff going on, but when you start to talk about these things in depth and how they've impacted people are really interested. Entrepreneurs are some of the most haunted people in the sense of like they're being driven by certain things. And I think a lot of us are wanting to uncover that and to figure out, how I can be more attuned with who I am as a person and how I can be a better version of myself in the future. So I think these compounds are one of, not the only, but one of the gateways, one of the tools that people can use to, live a better life. And that's what I'm all here about.
Well, I'm inspired. I think I'm going to live a better life just by having this conversation with you. Matt Ritchey, really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Really appreciate you.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Matt Balaker podcast. To learn more, please check out mattbalaker.com and encourage your friends to like, subscribe, and share. Really appreciate it.